This is Spirit Gym. We are living in a time where men are shamed for their strength and attacked for their masculinity, where feminine energy has been hijacked by the hustle culture, and women are praised for their burnout, and where so-called success is often just a mask for spiritual starvation. In today's powerful episode, Paul welcomes back Julie Dean Richards, author, speaker, and attorney, whose personal story challenges everything we've been taught about power, gender, healing, and identity. Julie embodies what it means to be strong, feminine, and whole in a world that's lost its connection to nature, soul, and self. Paul and Julie explore the alchemy of pain, the crisis of modern masculinity, the spiritual causes of burnout, the mystical path of feminine embodiment, the ancestral wisdom of birth and death, and the deep soul contracts that shape our journey through trauma, motherhood, and awakening. This conversation is a call to reclaim what's real, raw, and rooted, and to remind us that the most sacred work we do often begins in the shadows. If you enjoy this episode, we invite you to explore the deeper levels of connection and conversation available in the Spirit Gym membership community. Go to myspiritgym.com for details. And finally, before diving in, we'd just like to say thank you for listening, as this podcast would not be possible without you, our subscribers and followers, and also our premier sponsors, Organifi, Bioptimizers, Paleo Valley, and Wild Pastures. You can find their special offers and discounts throughout this episode, or visit the show notes page at paulchek.com/podcast.
Well, hello. As you heard from Penny's beautiful introduction, I have one of my favorite women in the whole world on the podcast again today, Julie Dean Richards. And I'm sure this is going to be a very interesting conversation. I just told Julie a second ago, I'm excited to have a good dialogue with her. I always love her fiery, bubbly, beautiful energy. So Julie, welcome back.
Oh, thank you so much, Paul. It's such a pleasure to be here as always.
Awesome. Well, my first question's a real tricky one. What have you been up to since our last podcast?
Well, I've been doing a lot of things. One of the things I've been concentrating on, which we'll get in more, is my school and helping women tap into their femininity, and also men understand the divine feminine. So I've been doing a lot of that. I became an official attorney in between our podcasts.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Now I have an extra helper if I run into trouble.
That's right. Which was fun. Over the summer, I did like some research, a little bit for RFK Jr. and people like that. That was really cool. And now we're doing something really big, which is we are moving and we are becoming nomadic as a family. So we're really excited about that.
That's pretty cool. Now, how are you going to do that? Are you going to use a mobile home or tents, or what are you doing?
We're doing the craziest way that you could do it. So we're going to live in tents as we go across the country.
So are you just going to load everything into a car and then unload and things like that?
Yeah, we're just going to load everything into a car. You can book out campsites for like a month at a, prorated rate. And so we'll kind of set up shop in a place for a little while, and then we'll move to another destination. So we'll see how it goes with the 3 kids.
Well, it'll be interesting because when I don't know how old I was, when my mother remarried to my stepfather, I guess I was about 7. I think the first year they were together, we went on a long vacation, and that's what we did. We carried tent and camp stove, and we just traveled all over. I can't remember how long it was, but it was a good long trip, and I just remember camping all over the place in the desert and the mountains, and it was great. I was one of the highlights of my life. When I look back on my childhood, that's one of the first things that I remember as something that, I really enjoyed.
Oh, that's good. That's the hope. The kids are incredibly excited about it. And I really want to connect them to nature and myself back to nature and kind of get our rhythms back, with the sun and the moon and, just having them connected more. And I think they'll have a good time. I think a lot of people have been worried about what will happen with the kids, but I think kids are so resilient and naturally connected to nature. So I think they'll have a good time.
I don't think the problem's going to be the trip. I think the problem's going to be when you try to get them back into a house after that.
That's true.
They're going to be like, we want to camp in the backyard. What's this crazy electric lights and wooden doors? We want to go be free again.
That's right. We'll just come to your house, Paul, and we'll
You can
camp
do that.
in your backyard.
We have 14 acres of back, front, and side yards.
Oh, that will be perfect. Yeah, we'll just camp out at your house. People come
Yeah.
find us.
I got a buddy who just moved out of his house and rented a motorhome, and he's set up a big double tent down there, and he's got his motorhome, and he's been here for, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks now, and he was down in Point Loma area, which is right next to the Naval Marine Base. And I remember when I first went to visit him, I went, oh my God, this place is just rocking with high energy 5G and radar, and like my whole body felt like I was in a microwave oven. And I said to him, I said, how in the world do you live in this place, man? This is crazy. I would die in this house. But he'd put so much time and energy into beautiful gardens, and he had his whole art workshop in there. But eventually life's circumstances led him to realizing it was time to go. And after being here for a couple of weeks, he came to me one morning for an espresso, and he goes, man, I can't believe how much better I feel now that I'm staying here. I said, of course, you're completely out of 5G. You're close to nature. You're alive again, baby.
That's right. It makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it's cool for us because, even though we have a real beautiful big home, we spend a lot of time outside. The kids are outside a lot. We have a farm and orchards and greenhouse and bed gardens, and I have a big rock stacking area that I go out and lift rocks out in nature in, and it's really a nice balance for us. So I never really feel like I'm disconnected from nature. I just get the joy of sleeping in a beautiful house and eating in a beautiful house, and then going outside and being in the beauty of nature, and that's my dream for everybody.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I want everyone to have that too. And it's going to be fun to be so connected to it.
Yeah, I think you'll probably find neat little things happening inside of you, such as a centering, a calming, a sense of connection. You'll be able to see the stars and the moon better when you get away from all the city lights.
Totally.
And you'll probably all of you will probably relax and feel really good.
That's what I need. I think that's what most women and men need right now, is just to relax a little bit and let their nervous system relax.
Yeah, well, the last 5 years has been a complete wind up, hasn't it? It's just like all this shit going on. And I don't know, I think I literally felt the whole country relax the minute everyone knew Donald Trump was the president. It was like, I'm very sensitive to the collective, and I felt just a calming effect that was really pretty much global. I felt like the whole world relaxed because, not so much because I'm a lover of Donald Trump, but because at least we had somebody that was interested in our country and could string a sentence together and got rid of the Kamala Harris Biden kind of disease,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really hope so. I hope it continues. And I think with RFK Jr. now as the head of HHS, we'll see big change. We already are. They just stopped, I think it's $250 million from going to more experimental vaccination trials to actually make sure there's some safety there. So we're already seeing huge shifts.
Yeah, I think I saw on InfoWars that President Trump was considering a 10-year ban on all mRNA vaccines until they can sort the research out. But meanwhile, right when he was in the beginning there, who does he bring on? A bunch of these mRNA cancer vaccine guys. And then you got then the wild card is his relationship with Elon Musk, because God knows where that could go. I mean, Elon Musk is one of these guys that can, move mountains, but can also destroy a lot with his agenda. So I get a little worried about putting all this money into putting people on Mars and the moon and off the planet when the planet's dying, and all that money should be going into taking care of the Mother Nature that you're about to go out into. It's one of the things that happens when you understand soil science, farming, environmental science. You realize how completely unconscious the majority of humanity is as to what's happening to the planet. And it's really, really dangerous.
Yeah, totally. We're not out of the woods yet, so to speak. Ironically, we're still sifting through so much as a collective, and hopefully we'll bring back some balance. We still have to be on our toes a little bit, but hopefully we can, some better stuff is coming through as we shed everything this year.
I would say before people were very lost, but now at least we found a marked trail that's pointing towards somewhat of a sanity,
Yeah, for sure.
And when you're lost in the woods, I remember one time I was probably 15. I went on a long hiking trip deep in the mountains on Vancouver Island with a buddy of mine. And somehow we were following maps because it was, trails, and it's a big ski mountain there called Mount Washington. And somehow we ended up getting to a place where idiots had knocked the signs off all the trails, and you couldn't tell which way you were going. So we had to guess. We ended up getting quite lost and in some really rugged, steep territory. And we were running low on food and water, and we'd been out for a few days. And I remember the feeling of the anxiousness of, wow, we're lost and we don't even know what direction to go to get home, but we just used our intuition, and lo and behold, we found a marked trail, and from there we were okay. But it's, when you have a whole world that's lost like it was during the pandemic, it really creates a lot of anxiety in people and fear, and people start making decisions based on fear, not based on rationality. And the more afraid you are, the less intuitive access you get. So it leads to it can really lead to what we called in the Army a circle jerk, where everybody's confused and going in circles.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that's part of the reason, like, what we're talking about today is so important, because we have been so lost and now we're trying to integrate back in everything. And that's why I think this peace is really like very important for us, integrating and finding and walking on that trail again.
Alchemy, of all the systems I've studied, is the one that sits truest in my heart. I have a deep passion for alchemy. When I studied Jung's work on alchemy, and I'm grateful Steiner too, but Jung is who I dived in deep first. And I'm grateful for that because Jung really gave me a sense of what alchemy was. And then I probably read another 50 books on alchemy. But without the grounding I had from Jung, alchemy is like a lot of things. You get a lot of systems that are very contradictory to each other. And so you're like, wait a minute, well, who's on first here? 1 minute you're assigning this quality to the north, and then next guy puts the opposite one there. And it's kind of like the Native American four directions. If you start studying different books and tribal philosophies, it's all bass backwards. And you're like, okay, how can any of this work? And so I answered my own question. The answer to the question is, how can any of it work? It is your intention that draws spirit from potential. So no matter what you assign to any of these positions, if your intention is to grow or to heal or to learn, that's what'll happen.
Yeah, 100%, right? Like, alchemy is this transmutation, a creation of something new. And, typically we talk about alchemy, like when people look back in the history books, they talk about alchemy as like, oh, they were trying to make things into gold, right? Let's turn lead into gold. But alchemy is so much more than that. And the alchemical process is so much more. It's this transmutation of your soul, right? The purification process and creating and bringing out what is really truly part of you, and letting that piece shine. And there's lots of different alchemical paths, I think, but I think it's exactly what you said, Paul, is your intention is everything. What you assign is everything to that.
Speaking of the concept of lead to gold, do you know the story of how alchemy transitioned from just being what we now call chemistry into what would be more of a spiritual alchemy?
I have some ideas, but I would love to hear your thoughts on it.
Well, what Jung shows, and and there's lots of documentation for this going, well back beyond, even before the 1500s, even into the 1400s. And I've studied Egyptian alchemy, I've studied Chinese alchemy, I've studied Western alchemy, I've studied, many different experts. Jung, Steiner has lots on alchemy. But what Jung shows, and he has interesting pictures to show this in some of his books, that the alchemists were doing these long, drawn-out chemical experiments, originally trying to turn lead to gold. At least that's how the story goes. We don't really know, because alchemy is very old. I think alchemy is as old as cooking, because cooking is alchemy. And what Jung says is that the alchemists noticed that as they were staring at their bubbling beakers, there's a name for those things, I forgot them. It's not really called a beaker in alchemy, but that they would be doing these different chemical experiments, and they noticed that if they were in a bad mood, the chemical behavior and the behavior of the fluids and even the fire was different than when they were in a good mood or when they were centered in themselves. And because they were doing these experiments over and over, sometimes, like 100 times to try to get a result, they could see with consistency that how the outcome was varied depending on how they felt.
Yeah.
And so they sort of woke up to this fact that somehow matter is responding to what we call psyche. And so they began to realize there was something much deeper going on than just chemistry.
Yes, totally.
And if you look into the science of investigations of water and how sensitive water is and sensitive to psychic energies, which now we've got loads of that, which Masaru Emoto was the first one to really give us an indication of that with some imagery. But there is research going all the way back into the late 40s with people like Harold Saxon Burr doing research on water and showing that a quick example is, I think it was Harold Saxon Burr. He took two groups of seedlings of the same genus, gave one group to his college students, and had them hold a mason jar of water for at least 3 hours and just hold on to it. And then he watered the plants with water that his students held. And then he took a group of seedlings and watered them with water that they had taken to a psych ward, and they got people in the psych ward to hold the water or interact with it, or they set it on the table where they were sitting. And the plants that were watered with the water from the psych ward often did not grow toward the sun. They grew crooked. They often grew down toward the earth, and they looked very gnarled and sick. And I remember seeing the pictures of these two batches of plants, and it was mind-blowing how there was definitely a transfer of the psychic energy of the psychologically ill people, and it very much affected the gene expression of the water. And so because water's 99.99 something percent of our body by molecular count, you can see how we're constantly doing alchemy on ourselves, whether we know it or not. Either we're doing good alchemy or bad alchemy. But the system of alchemy as a process of extracting the spirit and the soul out of matter, which really is what Steiner said you have to do so you can be conscious after you die, I think because it's free of all the religious baggage, it's absolutely stunningly beautiful. And it's scientific, it's spiritual, it's methodical. There's a step-by-step process. And I think these are things that the majority of people are completely unconscious to. And it's why I developed my own system of alchemy called Chek Life Process Alchemy, which I've been just blessed to have done because I've helped so many people, and it's so efficient. I mean, I could get to the core of people's problems, probably about 80 to 90% faster than the way I used to have to go through, because the system of alchemy shows you what's going on at an elemental level inside of somebody, right? And that's the base level. But I know from speaking to you that you have a new web-based mentorship course. Is it out yet?
It is. Yep.
Okay, so is it still titled Feminine, the Feminine Alchemist membership program?
It is. Yep. It's
Okay, great. Why don't you tell me and everybody listening what led you to creating this course and why is it important for both men and women? Now, it says for women, but when I wrote this up, I wanted to know why it's important for men. I mean, obviously, there's not many men in the world that don't have a relationship with a woman unless they're an ET or someone that was born in a test tube. But I'd love to hear, what led you to creating this course and
yeah.
what is it intended to help people accomplish?
Yeah, I think so. The story behind this course really, I mean, it started before this, but a big part of it started when I was pregnant with my third daughter during law school. And so I had been about 7 weeks, I was about 7 weeks into law school and surprise pregnancy. I was really floored, but I had had a very deep spiritual experience 6 months before I found out I was pregnant with Azzy, my youngest, and where she told me her name and she told me, that she wanted to come through. And I had kind of disregarded it in this like, okay, that's great. I'll see you in 3 years, right? Like after law school.
You know how to make God laugh?
Yes, right? Just try to tell him your plans, right?
Te- Tell her you've got a plan.
Yeah, that's right. I Yes, and I, just had this idea, yeah, I'll have this baby 3 years later. Well, surprise, she showed up, 6 months later, and I was in, the thick of everything with law school, and it was really, we've been talking about the pandemic. It was deep into the pandemic, right? We were in like the most explosive time when I was starting that first year, 7 weeks in, everyone masked up, like just so much darkness. And I felt so deeply like I cannot bring my daughter into this world, this kind of world. Like she has got to know what I didn't know. And before that point, I had been studying what I would call womancraft, which is
Right.
really the bringing back of the ancient wisdom that women have had for thousands of years that actually help to support men as well. But I had been studying it deeply, and I felt, okay, I really need to tap into this. I'm in such a masculine environment with my daughter, and I wanted to be able, like exactly what we were talking about. Like I knew this stuff about the water. My thoughts and feelings were going to affect me and affect her because we're all made of water. I wanted to make this an alchemical process for the two of us. And I actually ended up having a free birth with her. And so she was
You mean
born
a
just
home
me.
birth?
A free birth is where there's not any medical personnel there. So no midwife, just me
Oh,
and my
wow.
husband. Yeah,
You,
just the two
you,
of
you
us.
really trust your instincts, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I knew, I don't know. I know my body. I'd had a home birth before. This was my third baby. And I just felt so strongly we needed to do this by ourselves, just me and my husband. My mother ended up being there also, which was great because she ended up catching, which was good to have someone to catch the baby. But yeah, during this whole process of law school, it was like I was in this dichotomy. I was in this dichotomy of a very masculinized world that was very centered on what I would call like the matrix, right? This very matrix-esque
Yes.
world. And
Yeah.
then the internal part of me was very much in not the matrix. It was in this more feminine spot, creating life and doing what is the actual most important thing with my life by creating this space for my daughter. And with her birth, and that experience, having that free birth, just the two of us, it was just so powerful. It was one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had to feel her just come through me and to completely trust my body and to know like when she was going to be born and the moment. And it was after this experience that I just felt like, women need this. Like there are women who are struggling who need this experience. They need to understand the feminine and the masculine because we have been so tricked these days. There are with the trans agenda, with everything that's been coming up to kind of flatten women and push them in a corner and all of these things. There are so many women that have been told for so long, to be successful, you've got to be like a man. And this doesn't just hurt women, this hurts men as well, right?
Yeah, not only is it stupid and dangerous, but you're talking to a guy that's been a therapist for 41 years. I owned a physical therapy clinic. I worked in the biggest one in San Diego for 4 years. I worked with a chiropractor for 2 years. And I have seen a long string of burned out women.
Yep.
And when a woman wears pants and starts playing that game, it usually first shows up as menstrual cycle disruption. But you know, there's a disease. I don't know if you know this. You know what the term successful white woman's disease is?
Oh gosh, what is it? Dysmenorrhea?
Endometriosis.
Oh yes, endometriosis. Yeah.
I have seen countless women with endometriosis and
Yep.
uterine fibroids,
Totally.
and most of them were single mothers. And interestingly, a lot of them were legal assistants. And they're researching day and night, and they're trying to make a living, and they're trying to squeeze the gym in. And unfortunately, you couple that with veganism, and you got a death stroke. And I had a lot of them that were living off of rabbit food. And my God, it's a tough situation for women if they lose their partner and they're out there trying to make a living. And unfortunately, a lot of them had deadhead men that weren't supporting them, even though they were often 1, 2, 3 kids. But you know, we've created this. I mean, I don't have to tell you, but we're on this industrial treadmill that just kills people and makes them highly profitable, and it's just bad. I mean, but the reality of it is, you know, it's easy to walk around and say, oh, the world's all fucked up and blah, 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 and fall into the trap of just taking the pills and keep doing what you're doing. But every one of us has the choice to create the life we want. We can, you know, look what you're doing. You're going nomadic, right? That's your choice. A lot of people would think you're crazy. I think you're a genius.
Thank you.
Which is why I love having you on the podcast. But we all have the choice to create the life we want. Even in COVID, we had the choice to get vaccinated or not get vaccinated. Nobody can make you do anything.
Yep.
The number of people that have come to me with severe vaccine injuries and problems in their family and said, I had to, I said, you're using the words of a child. Children say I had to. Adults say I chose to. And that's one of the problems we have today is we just have a lot of kids in adult bodies that suffer the consequences of adult freedoms with a child's mind.
Yes. And we've incentivized that. We have incentivized that kind of world. We've incentivized a victim attitude and mindset amongst ourselves. And, you know, it's hard. You can have really hard choices. You know, for some people, getting vaccinated or not was a very difficult choice. It's scary to lose your job. It's scary to go up against, you know, the other people looking at you and peer pressure. Yeah, that's scary, but it's always still a choice. You know, it's our choice what we do with our mindset and what we do. And that's why this is so important to me is I want women to understand like there is another choice. And I want men to understand there is another choice and a way that we can heal so much of this rhetoric that we have given ourselves about the way we're supposed to be, the shoulds that we have given ourselves, and awaken what's actually powerful within us, that all of us have, that divine part of ourselves, so that we can create the life that we want.
Well, you could say alchemy is really just a long string of choices. It's just guided by the intention and the practices and the stages of alchemical development. So, yeah. So you created this course because of the circumstances you were in, the experience you had. But I would like to know, what is it that you intend for people to get that go through the course? And I still would like to hear, how does a course for women help the men, if you could give us some straight language on that.
Yeah, totally. I want to start with the how it helps men question, right? Like you talked about, all of us are related to a woman, primarily our mother, our sisters. We have daughters, we have friends, but the world, the world does not turn on just one gender. There are two genders for a reason, right? We need each other. It's the yin and the yang. And when we have men that have, and I'll just say it this way because I think this might offend some people, but I think that's my job a little bit is
Well, if the truth, we can only speak our truth, and if it offends people, that's their choice. I mean, this not offending people is what led to all the censorship crap. I mean, there's more to it than just offending people, but when people don't have the depth to say, that's an interesting point of view.
Yeah.
I may not agree with it, but it's an interesting point of view. I mean, through the pandemic, I heard a lot of interesting point of views.
Yes, totally.
Right?
Yeah.
But I didn't get upset at people.
Right.
I just said, well, if you want to be in the experiment, go ahead. I'm happy to be in the control group. So rock and roll. But just know that, as many of them said to me, well, one of two things is going to happen. Either I'm going to be protected and you're not, or you're going to come out better and I'm not. And I said, that's why they call it science.
Yep, exactly. Totally. Well, then what I would say is we have a lot of men who have self-effeminized themselves. And what I mean by that, when I say that we have men who have self-effeminized themselves, is we have this dynamic, which you described earlier, of women now feeling like I've got to take charge. I have to do what a man does to be successful, to be worthy, to be helpful. And then what happens to the men in those relationships? Well, then the men take on the feminine energy, because you can't help but have both the masculine and feminine energy. And it's going to be into proportion that the two of you in that relationship are ready for and putting into that dynamic. There's always going to be a push-pull. And so what we have is, we have men that then become the receiving end of everything, meaning, right, we hear all the time women complaining like, men are not helping me with the kids, they make me do everything. They get home and they just sit on the couch and they do nothing, or, they play video games all day. And and it may not look like, and I'm not even pointing this at like the trans issue that we addressed earlier with men trying to become women, although like you could say that is a symptom of this, but also all the men who want to sit back and are in that receiving position now, playing video games all day, sitting and allowing, a more dominant woman to come in and push at them. And that's not to say it's not, women cannot be assertive or whatever. Obviously, I'm a very assertive woman. I will speak my mind, right? Or that men can't receive pleasure. Of course they can receive pleasure. Of course, that's a huge part of the dynamic. We both push and pull, but we have this overemphasized dynamic right now where men are becoming, because of this rise up of like woman power and all this kind of stuff, in the wrong ways, we're now pushing men down as we try to elevate women instead of elevating both of us together and working together. And we're making it so that men feel like they have to sit in a corner, or they can't say anything, or they just should sit and do nothing, or whatever it is, and women who feel like they've got to push, and they burn themselves out into oblivion. And so the point that I'm trying to get across is, even if you are not part of this program, right? Even though we don't have men in the Feminine Alchemist school, this affects our ripple effect of helping women tap into their feminine energy, activate the divine feminine within themselves, and step into their true power, also alleviates men and helps men step into their masculine power. And so we can be equally yoked with each other, and we can both rise together rather than, it's not a competition. Like, I'm so done with the competition. Like, I'm really done with this, like, women are better than men and men are better than women, because none of that is true. That's not true at all.
It's just childish. The fact that that's even an issue is just sad for me. It's like, talk about the degradation of common sense, education, consciousness. And the thought that rose up in me while you were talking is, as a man, I'm 63, so I'm like from a different generation of most of the people you're talking about. I've studied Leonard Sax's work on this, which is quite deep and revealing. But we've got a really serious lack of male leadership figures. I mean, most of them, you look at who gets real popular on the internet, and occasionally you get like the Navy SEAL type. I think its name's David Goggins. You get, I love Alec Zek. He's like a real sharp, good, ex-West Point graduate. But as a general theme, like young men's fathers have turned into kind of fuddy-duddy.
Yes.
And, they too just sit and watch television. And I mean, the amount of men that don't even know how to use a hammer and a saw and fix something and dig a ditch or anything. It's like we have been so engaged in technology and machine use that human beings have unconsciously become machines, and they don't have enough agency. And there's so much orientation toward self in parents that you now have parents and grandparents that babysit their kids with social media, television screens, and video games, instead of taking them out on a nomadic journey or, going hunting or going to a farm and learning how farming, things that actually are part of the life process. As my father was, not an easy guy to be with, but he was a full-on freaking man. I mean, this guy was, he could shoot, he could hunt, he could process an animal, he could run the farm without any question at all. I mean, he was a total badass warrior. And so I got to be raised with like a grizzly bear in my house. And I learned, get a job done. Don't complain. Get shit done or you're useless, and think for yourself. Use your mind.
Yeah.
Don't keep asking questions unless you've tried to make an effort. But the point is we've just got a serious lack of good examples for women to follow and for men to follow. That's why when I love a chance to speak to you. I mean, the first time I did a podcast with you, you blew my mind, the amount of knowledge you had, and you're only in your 30s. I'm like, where on earth did this girl come from? And, I've got two really powerful women that I'm married to, and they're just badass women. I mean, they can kick some ass, these girls. They can build anything, do anything, go anywhere, and there's just not enough male or female leaders and examples to follow that aren't just lost in their mind or just tricking people for money. And it's a really dangerous situation for a culture to fall into that, because our children are our future. And
Yes.
if we don't have grounded leaders producing grounded young people, shit, do the math. One of the most common questions I get from people around the world is, Paul, how do you make those great smokes I see you enjoying? Well, my friends, I can assure you that there is some real alchemy involved in effectively using a vaporizer and getting the results that you truly want. In my upcoming Herbal Alchemy Workshop online, June 7th, 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time, I will offer 3 hours of herbal alchemy training with Q&A included. You will learn how to vaporize tobacco, herbs, use flower essences, animal essences, and a variety of healing essential oils. I will explain what I use to create a variety of specific states and how you can use your vaporizer to enhance everything from sexual pleasure to mental focus, meditation, enhanced visioning, and relaxation. I will also share the do's and don'ts of vaporizing and my recommended healthy practices that are important with regular vaporizing. Registered participants that cannot make the live event can access the recording for a given time period. To learn more and register for my online herbal alchemy workshop, go to paulchek.com/events/herbal-alchemy. I can't wait to share how I make the amazing smokes that I do and how I can show you to use the vaporizer for a wide variety of other useful things. Enjoy.
Yeah, completely. Well, we have these kind of archetypes that men fall into now that I think that we see over and over again. One you talked about is we're often shown the fuddy-duddy dad, right? The dad who's dumb, the dad who doesn't know what he's talking about, the dad who makes all the mistakes. You can even read like kids' books like the Berenstain Bears, where the dad is always making terrible mistakes. He doesn't know what he's doing. So we have that example of like the man who's stupid, right? Or funny. Then we have the other example of men is often the tyrant, right? You've got the tyrant king. He's a tyrant. He's awful. He's hurting everybody. You know, you rarely see like even men who are heroes, like you rarely see them as being what a true man is and providing. There's always some kind of the anti-hero effect, right? There's always some kind of chink to who they are. Not that people can't make mistakes or that people can't be 3D. It's not about that. But there's often now this rise of like the villain as looking like the good guy and the villain of a man being the right kind of man. Not that people can't change or whatever, but those are the three things I think we see the most often. It's pretty rarely that we see men, helping women in a way where it's not like they're just stepping out of their way or they're stepping into their way, but where men and women are actually working together and using the masculine and feminine energy in a way that allows them to like ascend and transmutate and create alchemy.
I think the health of a culture is inversely proportional to the number of men that polish their fingernails.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm always amazed when I see men with pristine white teeth, like a model, and polished fingernails, and obviously haven't touched dirt in most of their life. And I'm like, dude, grab a little bit of man juice, would you? Quit hiding behind the wheel of your Mercedes Benz or your whatever. It's just like, it's dangerous. And, you know, I'm a man. I know what it looks like when I see another man. If you want to meet a man, go meet Kyle Kingsbury or
Oh yeah.
somebody like that. You know, it's like, that's a man, you know?
Oh yeah.
And
100%.
you know, a lot of my friends, Laird Hamilton, that's a man. You know, I've worked with a lot of the greatest athletes and business guys in the world, and I know what it's like when you're with men, and there's a woman should feel safe when she's with a man. She should feel like no matter what happens, I've got my knight in shining armor. He's going to go out. But half the men these days, if somebody was breaking into the house, they'd curl up in a fetal position and expect their partner, the female, to go defend them or something. It's like,
right, because that's her archetype.
Nuts.
Yeah.
What's that?
Oh, I was saying because that's her archetype now, right? Like that's the archetype that we see of the woman is, oh, she is the amazing heroine who's going to kill everybody, and women. We're always seeing women, chopping off people's heads, and now they've got to be in charge of everything and everyone, and pushing down men, right? Those are the really the archetypes, or it's the archetype of the woman that nobody listens to, right? No one's listening to her. And so she's got to rise up and she's got to show them, these are the things that women and men are seeing, and they're in the media, especially. And it's teaching us, oh, this is your role. And I would say, like, I don't think to be a man or to be in your masculine energy, you have to be, the Hulk. Like, you don't have to be the Hulk. You don't have to be perfect at everything you do,
Not at all. You just have to have a sense of direction in your life and a sense and a clear sense of values, and know what the role of a man is. I mean, it's It's like that movie. I can't remember what it was called. What is a Woman or something?
Yes. Oh yeah, Matt.
The best part was the very end when his wife couldn't open the lid on a jar, and
Yeah.
he said something like, "Honey, what is a man?" She handed him the jar, and he opened it, and she said that.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly, but it was so funny how that movie ended, because it was just a great example, right? The average male's 30% stronger than the female at the same body weight.
Right.
There's certain things men are meant to do. Women have a lot better endurance. They have all sorts of things that men don't have. They have better hearing. They have better peripheral vision. Because their function is to keep an eye on the children and to keep the family together and keep the place safe. But, women are like circles. Men are like arrows. They got to go out and get shit done. Go somewhere. Find some new territory. Go find that animal. Bring the bacon home, baby.
That's right.
I mean, we can't lose sight of like the natural dynamics of the male and the female. And yes, look, I had a girlfriend once who played high school football on the boys team, who could beat all my friends, including me, in one-on-one in basketball, who was just a downright badass, but she was still one hell of a amazing and beautiful woman, right? So the point is, we all have both polarities in us, and the journey of alchemy, as you know, is the ultimate, the hieros gamos, the marriage of those two qualities, and that's a very special thing, and
Totally.
Men think, oh, I don't want to become girly. No, but you do want to learn to use your feelings.
Yes.
You do want to pay attention to your heart.
Yeah.
You do want to learn to listen to women.
Yeah.
You do want to, learn to see better and have more empathy and compassion, and learn to listen to children instead of just beating the shit out of them because you can't hear your TV show or whatever the fuck.
Yep. Yep.
I think I'm just glad you created the course. So can you share? Oh, did you have more to share?
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah. And I think that's kind of the point for any men listening, like you understanding some of this information and bringing it to the women in your life will help you to understand your space too. The way the masculine plays out, and it will help create balance in our world, right? Like as one gender balances, the other does too. It brings everything. If one's out of balance, the other's out of balance. And so it can create better, lasting, longer relationships and help you to understand your purpose more deeply, and we kind of touched on this, and I think probably people know this, maybe, but if we want to think about it as earth and water, right? The masculine is like the beautiful structure. It can be a beautiful well, or it can be this wall that runs through and allows the water to run through, because the feminine is like that water. It's flowing, but it needs a structure. I mean, you've got the ocean. Even the ocean is contained by the sand underneath and by the waves. And of course, the ocean can beat on the waves and she can rage. And yeah, women have rage in them and men have grief in them. And we need to bring both of these to the forefront, right? And allow ourselves to feel, like you were talking about, bringing our feelings into action. But we both need each other, right? The feminine is that beautiful water that runs through and that flows through everything, that's intuitive and that's powerful, and that's heart-led. And the masculine is that beautiful structure that makes buildings and helps us know where we're going, and contains this, makes these wonderful structures that bring life and light, and they both need each other. And so I think that's why this course is so important for men and for women. And what I want women to understand and get out of this is to be able to open up their divine feminine, to bring out the divinity within them, and to remember what we have lost. Remember the ancient traditions that all of us have lost, that could make our world such a better place, could alchemize our souls and help us to transcend and become, our full, whole, authentic selves. And if we were all our authentic selves, like this earth would be completely changed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We are the earth.
Yes.
In order to become our authentic selves, we have to realize what the participation and contribution of the earth, the water, the fire, and the air is. That's the
Yeah.
core of alchemy. I mean, if you don't have that right, you're never going to become your authentic self, because you'll always have, and these elements are active emotionally and mentally as well. They're not just physical. And you reminded me, I don't remember, I think it was Plato, but do you know about the myth that talks about when the gods originally created human beings and they were round like spheres?
No, remind me of this one.
Yeah, well, in the myth, they were round like spheres, and there was arms and legs sticking out of the sphere, and but the gods were so irritated because human beings were so powerful they couldn't control them. So the gods got together and said, well, we need to cook up a plan to control these creatures because they're too powerful. So after a debate, they said, well, I got an idea. Let's just cut them in half. And one half became the woman and the other half became the man. And when they were divided, they were easy to control.
Very
And
true.
so, right, what's at the core of the story? When we're united,
Yeah.
we're uncontrollable even by the gods.
Exactly. And that's the truth, right? We want to unite. And that's what I'm hoping to bring is I can bring the masculine and feminine together. So we're united. So we can't be controlled, right? We don't have more situations. We can make a better earth and we can transcend both inside ourselves, but also the earth as well.
Well, you've kind of answered my next question, so I'm going to change it a little bit, because now that I've heard what you've said, I'm going to throw you a little curveball. When you speak about alchemy and you're speaking about it in the context of helping women, what exactly are you talking about? I mean, I have some idea because I'm a student of alchemy. I practice it and I work with men and women. But for most people listening, they probably can't really grasp the concept of alchemy, because most people, if they have any connection to it at all, they think it's chemistry. So I'd love to hear you talk about what is this process that you take people through? How is it alchemy, and what are they going to do?
Yeah.
For example, how do you find the imbalance and know what to do from an alchemical perspective? You can't do that without some kind of assessment protocol.
Right. Yeah, totally. I think this is a perfect question. And I think we're going to get even deeper into it later in our interview when we talk a little more about the heroine's journey. But one of the big things is exactly like Paul said, right? Alchemy is really this transmutation, right? It's creating something out of something else, really. If we break it down, it's making something new or better or transcending. And so in our membership, we do this in a lot of ways. So we talk about giving women the wisdom, the skills, and the rituals of the feminine. And a big part of this, as I'm sure Paul will know, and people here have heard, is a big part of this is going to be, as we learn these wisdoms, understanding our own shadows. So when women go through this course, we put women through, there are 3 different sections, right? We have community, which is really important for us to support each other. We have the school, which are the courses that help teach us, the wisdoms, the skills and rituals of the feminine. And then we have the heroine's journey that helps women go through this actual alchemy process, which is partially, this descent phase has a lot to do with identifying our shadow, just like Jung talks about, and so many others, right? We disassociate from ourselves. I think the myth we were talking about is so perfect for this because we have divided ourselves. Not only are men and women divided, but we divide from ourselves. That's why Angie works with helping bring back people's soul pieces, because we say something or hear something from someone else and we feel ashamed about that thing. This is usually how it comes up. We feel some kind of feeling about an experience we've had. So I'm going to just use this small example. Let's say I was sitting on the couch as a kid and my mom came up to me and she said, "Why are you so lazy? You're so lazy, Julie." Then I might take that. I'd look at my mom and say, oh, lazy is bad. It's bad to be lazy. And if I'm lazy, I am bad. And so what I might do is I might take that word lazy, or that part of me that wants to rest, that part of me that needs rejuvenation, and I would throw it into my shadow, what we called the shadow. I would make it not part of me anymore and separate it from myself. And then as I grow up, what might happen is when I see other people who I deem to be lazy, right? I might look at them and get triggered by them. I'd feel some emotion.
Absolutely.
Right. And I might say, because I've got it in my head, oh, they are bad because they are lazy. Lazy is bad. And I've learned that lazy is bad. So if I see someone else doing that, that they must be bad. And so often the things that trigger us are the parts of us that we've hidden from ourselves.
Absolutely. That's called projection psychologically.
Yes.
When you're not dealing with what's in you, you project it out onto somebody else and they become the scapegoat.
Totally. Yeah. And that's why we get angry about people, or certain people just bug us, right? They just bug you. There's just something about them that bugs you, something they do. And it's really important to listen to the language that you use about other people and ask yourself, why am I saying this? Why am I so bugged by this person? Why am I so angry about them? Like, why does this trait really rub me raw, right? And rub me the wrong way? Because that helps us identify where our shadow is. And the beautiful part of alchemy is taking all these soul pieces. I really like to describe it as like we're onions, right? As we go through our life, the center of us is pure, it's whole, it's authentic, but then we go through our lives and we get shame, we get pain, we get programming, and we start to layer ourselves like this onion and put on these layers and hide the parts of ourselves that is true. Because we can call something laziness, right? Like my mother could call me lazy, but what does that actually mean? Is it actually bad to want time to rest? Is it bad to want time to rejuvenate yourself? Is it really bad? We label with this word of laziness, but maybe the true part of you just needs time to rest. It just needs time to let go. And so when you let go of that part, what might happen, right, to someone like me might be like, I have to prove my mom wrong. I have to show her that I'm really good. And so I can never be lazy. I have to work all the time. And then I might end up burning myself out. And most people do that, right? Like this is what happens to most humans. We end up burning ourselves out because we've labeled these parts of ourselves as bad. And so alchemy in my course is this process of, okay, let's find the shadow. Let's find our triggers. Let's peel back the onion layers. And we do this through archetypes, right? We do this through meditations. We do this through learning, some esoteric teachings and applying them to ourselves. We do this through ritual. Especially embodiment is really important to us, being in our bodies, because there's something, and this is important for men too, but I think we've gotten to this place where we've said the body is bad a lot.
Well, you can thank religion for a lot of that. All you got to do is read the Bible to see how that got going.
Totally. Well, but we've also got even people like Plato and Aristotle, right? Like the spirit is so much more important than the body. The body is not as important as what the spirit is.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, we have those, and we've thought, even in like spiritual circles, we will often hear, right? Like your spirit is what matters, that's what transcends, and it's all about like, how do you transcend and get out of your body? How do I get out of my, to the next level out of my body? When really, I would say, especially for women, like your body is the key to your alchemy.
Well, look, if there's one thing that is a living example of alchemy, it's the metamorphosis of the larva that leads to the caterpillar, that leads to the cocoon, that leads to the butterfly. So this whole idea of that your spirit is more important than your body is to say that the butterfly is more important than the cocoon, but the butterfly can't even exist without the cocoon. And if you don't keep the cocoon healthy, then the butterfly's got no chance. Poison the cocoon, no butterfly. Crack it open prematurely, no butterfly. That's one of the challenges with psychedelic drugs, is they can crack the cocoon open. And, when that much spirit comes pouring in, it's like oxidizing something that needs to be protected by a layer of fat and moisture. But this is why I teach holism. and why my whole institute's built on holistic health, because people have all these weird damn ideas, and sadly, a lot of them come from religious ideology, and it leads to a lot of isms and belief systems that don't get questioned, and people just, what do we got? We got a world full of sick people, thousands of years of religion and isms and ideologies, and we're still confused about what it takes to be healthy and what it means to be a man or a woman, or et cetera, et cetera. So you're right. We definitely need a balance of body, mind, and spirit.
Yeah. And I think something that most people, I don't know, as we have gotten lost in the isms, as we've gotten lost in saying like our bodies are bad, and even as we have created this boss woman culture, like this culture that women have to be like men to be successful, we've really gotten away from the importance of women's tie to their bodies, right? Because women are creation itself. We create life. And I like to put it this way, because I don't think people think about this, but women weave together time and space. And that's why the veil is such a beautiful symbol of the divine feminine and of women, is because we are the veil, right? Like the spirit passes through us to be born. We pull it down and through us. And we've demonized that so much. And I even think, and this is not to say that if anyone has had a medicalized birth or anything that, they're a terrible person or whatever, but I think medicalized birth has really torn women away from their bodies because it's so traumatic.
Absolutely. And doctors have been the medical system spent billions of dollars scaring the shit out of women, so they're afraid to actually have a natural birth process. And I mean, I've been through it with two of my three kids. When Paul Jr. was born in 1979, there was none of that really. I mean, Sue had a natural childbirth, 72 hours of labor, intense, but there wasn't just this constant, fear stuff thrown at you. It was more like, we got to help her through this.
Right. Yeah, totally. And now it is complete fear, right? It's kind of like when I tell people, I just have my baby in my house, like just me and my husband and my mom, people get really scared for me. Or if I talk about free birth with women, the first thing that gets, asked is like, how are you not afraid? How are you not afraid to have a child? And I think this fear, is really tied to our bodies, and we're holding years and years of trauma tied to what has happened to women's body through, what I would call medical rape, as, men go in and cut these women open and, give them episiotomies and do all those things. And again, modern medicine has a place. Emergency medicine has a place. It's not
all. Of course it does, but it's supposed to be for an emergency. And until you have an emergency, you shouldn't be using it. You're not supposed to go to the hospital for an emergency that hasn't happened yet.
Right.
It's the craziest thing. And the paradox that we've created is anybody with common sense today should be a lot more afraid of what's going to happen because you're in a hospital than what's going to happen with your body.
Yes.
Now, a side note in quotes here is that a lot of women today are so friggin' unhealthy when they get pregnant.
Yeah.
That those people probably need to go to the hospital because they're so detached from healthy living. I mean, God, I see women all the time pregnant, drinking large Starbucks coffees and alcohol and smoking cigarettes. And I've seen countless women that were obese before they got pregnant. I'm like, what in the world is going through your mind? And that's a problem.
Yeah. Well, and it's not just women. Men are really unhealthy too, right?
And, but they don't carry the baby.
Yeah, they
don't. It's not made out of their body. They just give a few chromosomes and watch.
Well, but there's research now that what the men contribute actually has a huge push on the outcome of the women. Like, for example, preeclampsia, they always thought, oh, it's the unhealthiness of the women. But now there's a lot of evidence that actually whether or not you get preeclampsia comes from the male side, not from the feminine side, because of
Do you
the way
mean from the genes?
yeah, from the way the sperm interacts with the
Oh,
egg.
yeah. Okay. Well, of course. Yeah, I'm not denying that at all. I mean, Christ, men are not any healthier than women. I mean, your sperm can't be any healthier than your diet and your mind and your emotions. It's all in there.
Yeah.
We got a across the board, what we called in the military is SNAE food. You know what that stands for?
You tell me what it stands for.
Situation normal, all fucked up.
Yeah, that's right.
And when it's normal when average becomes sick,
Yeah.
people begin to measure themselves against the average, but you're already at a very low common denominator. You're in big trouble. And I think that's why, again, I teach holistic health. It's like you got to learn the basics, and the fact that people are eating food that's just sprayed to death with poison, and drinking water that's poisoned, and breathing air that's poisoned, and not exercising, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, we're
This
wearing
is
plastic too, right? Like our clothes.
absolutely, and
Yeah.
metal is not good for you either. It turns
Yeah.
you into an antenna. But this is why I love, do you know my buddy in our family, OBGYN, Nathan Riley?
Yes, I do know Nathan.
Because
Yeah.
Nathan's podcast, the Holistic OBGYN, and his membership program, and Nathan went through my holistic lifestyle coach training program. And he's of all the medical doctors I've worked with in my life, which has been hundreds, I would say he's the most enlightened of all of them, and is the most balanced, healthy, wise doctor that really knows how to guide both men and women to prepare them for birth and through the birthing process. But there's just about a billion short of Nathans on the planet.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, he does such a great job. And I think he has been like a huge inspiration for so many, to look at. I have a friend who is an OBGYN, and he was like, yeah, I follow Dr. Nathan Riley and I'm learning I could do this. And now he has dreams of opening, right, a holistic birthing clinic. So there is a wave coming. All of that to say, all of this talk about birth, I mean, I think it's important to talk about birth because this is how we get onto the planet. This is where we're starting from. And if birth is messed up, everything else is going to be messed up. But all of that to say, embodiment and being in your body is a really important part of this transcendence piece. It's really important part of our alchemy piece, because if we're not in our bodies, we can't truly release our emotions. We can't truly integrate our shadow. We can't truly change. And
No.
so a big part of what we focus on is we talk about energetics. We talk about astrology and human design as women get to know themselves and know their true selves as tools. And then we talk about sacred embodiment. That's my favorite pillar. We talk about
Yeah.
sacred embodiment. We talk about being in your body, how to feel your feelings. I cannot tell you how many people on this planet do not know how to feel feelings. You think it would be natural, but we don't. We don't know how to feel our feelings.
Well,
and that's huge.
again, I'm sorry to interject, but
Yeah.
again, you can thank the medical system, because whenever people start feeling feelings, they give them drugs so they don't.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, that's completely and utterly, excuse me, but that's really fucked up.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you're supposed to learn from pain and work with it, learn from discomfort, work with it. And that's what alchemy is all about. That's what the alchemists have a saying. It's called cooking. Cooking, you got to sit in it. Don't just rush and take a pill. Sit with it. Pay attention to how you did it. What are you doing that's causing that? And if you don't know, then you got to find somebody that's skilled at an evaluation.
right.
But I only had to interject to say that, look, a lot of the people that can't feel their feelings have been drugged out of feeling. And when you put children on Ritalin and all these other drugs, and you vaccinate the shit out of them, make their bodies toxic, their biochemistry is already so screwed up that feelings that would normally be inconsequential become very consequential. They become
Totally.
temper tantrums and emotional outbursts. and then the pendulum swings very, very wildly. It's just like, and all the television and social media, like we've got to watch our kids really carefully. We have very tight limits. They're not allowed to watch any media during the school week, only when they're at the weekend, and then they have tight limits on it because the stuff affects their minds and their emotions like crazy. It's like
So
they're on
much.
drugs.
Yeah, so much. And the thing is, right now we're in a generation where we've had parents and parents and parents who don't know how to feel their feelings. And we've
Yes.
repressed and repressed and repressed our feelings. And now that's why we get these dissonant relationships. It just keeps getting worse because these parents who don't know how to deal with their feelings are raising kids who don't know how to deal with their feelings. And then what comes out is anger, what comes out is abuse, what comes out are these relationships that just harm all of us and create more shadow, more pain, more shame, and more programming.
Well, it also leads to a lot of neurosis and illness because that psychic energy has to go somewhere. Jung said if it wasn't for neurosis, most people would commit suicide. So the more your feelings aren't processed and aren't honored and worshiped, the more you repress those feelings, and that energy can turn darker and darker psychologically, and then your body begins to mirror that psychic energy. Most illnesses and diseases, a huge percentage of them are the physical manifestations of the repressed thoughts, feelings, emotions, and desires.
Totally, 100%. And I keep wanting to say this because you gave this example, but how fascinating that the word psyche also means butterfly, another interpretation of that, and how,
Yeah.
this alchemical process, our psyche is so delicate. It's a butterfly, and it also needs that cocoon, and it needs that chance to break out and to get stronger and stronger. It needs its body. And I think in the same way, right, we need to learn how to feel our feelings again through our bodies, in our bodies, integrate our shadows back into ourselves, start trusting our intuition, start not trusting what anybody else has to say, right? Not the isms, not the authoritarianism, right? We need to learn how to trust ourselves. And a huge part of that is reconnecting to the body. And that's a big part of what we do is we work with somatics, which the word somatic just means body. So we do
Tissue.
tissue. Yep. We do somatic healing courses. We teach women how to tap into their bodies, how to feel their feelings. We help them understand how to integrate their shadow, how to find their shadows. And to integrate that, we help them identify, where is their shame, where is their pain, where is their programming. And then we give them tools to help them understand, who am I really? Because when you strip all of this back, after you've been through this, Paul, but when you start stripping things away, you're like, who am I? I don't even know. I don't know who I am. I don't know where I'm going. And so, okay, we're going to teach you how to tap into your intuition and use some tools to understand this is who I really am. This is the key to my wholeness. And that obviously we're ever evolving. But this is part of the process of alchemy that we take women through.
Is just on that, I'm wondering if you have a community aspect to your program, because when people go through this process you're describing, there's that real period of feeling naked and lost because, just like people can identify themselves with illnesses and injuries, we call it illness behavior in therapy, they can get very identified with a lot of things that are not healthy, from their anger to their judgments to their ideology and many other things. And when you're doing a real alchemy, those things start falling away.
Yeah.
And so it's like someone who doesn't feel comfortable without makeup, all of a sudden they feel like they're walking around naked, and the insecurity makes them think everyone's looking at you,
Right.
And so do you have community in this program, and how do you support people through this transition process? Because that, in my opinion, as a therapist, I have to really often stay very close in contact with my patients and clients as I'm doing this kind of work on them, because that's when they're most susceptible to being afraid and falling back and reverting back into the child archetype and becoming running to mommy, daddy, family, and then they're just reprogrammed and they go, it's just exactly what you have to do to get somebody out of a cult.
Yep.
It's identical.
Yeah.
And if you don't have people that hold the values that are congruent with the person's dream for themselves, which is what you're guiding them to, then they just go right back into the milieu that created the disease. And so you can lose somebody that way. So it's a very tough transition because there's not very many healthy, integrated people around that you can take somebody to. So how do you handle that?
Yeah, so we have a community and that's a big part of our membership. We call it the gathering. And so we have within our community, we have women's circles. And we do that every month. We have a circle where everyone gets to share what they're going through. They get to get support and have space held for them. We also do within our community, we do like quarterly journeys or challenges that we help people through. So helping them with journaling, getting them sparked in talking to each other, supporting each other. We also hold like retreats and mini retreats, and we have expert workshops as well. But the community is a huge part of it. Like the women who are in it right now, they love, being able to be with like-hearted sisters, and women in particular, right? Are not that we all aren't wired for community, but women in particular are very gifted at creating those communities and needing those communities
Yeah, oh,
around
totally.
them. Yeah.
Yeah. There's an old saying, I'm sure you've heard it 1,000 times. It takes a tribe to raise a child.
Right. Yeah.
And it's very, very true. And one of the things I am blessed to see is how fortunate my children are to have two mothers, because I have two wives. And I see how much relief Penny gives Angie, because Angie's their birth mother. But, Angie's a busy professional too. And so, and they're both in Waldorf schools. And in Waldorf school here, the parents have to each commit 40 hours of support. So Angie's and Penny are both constantly, making food and gathering flowers and supplies for arts and plays. And there's no way Angie could do this alone without just burning herself out. And I can look at a lot of the women at these school gatherings and see they're just absolutely fried. And so the point I'm driving at is that the holding hands, and, if you think of a wheel, like a bicycle wheel, typical bicycle wheel's got 28 to 32 spokes. Each of those spokes is like a person in a community, in a normal tribal community, or in any healthy community or group. There's always a leader, you call them the hub, but then there's the rim that ties it all together. So if you hit a bump on a bicycle wheel, no matter if you hit the edge of a curb, the shock's attenuated through all 28 spokes. So if you don't have a healthy wheel to dissipate the stress of the transformation, or just the stress of being human and being in a, as Kabir says, you don't need to go off and meditate in caves if you want to grow spiritually. You should get married, have kids, and get a job. Then,
That's right.
then you'll learn what real spirituality is. Anybody can hide in a cave. And so I think, the real church is in the relationship and in the parenting and in the navigating of life. And I think that when you get people together that have shared values and shared mission and shared vision, it gives you something to give you enough levity to overcome the gravity of the challenges of life. And I think, I know in my Spirit Gym program, the community is more important than the lessons, because most people could not navigate the change process that the lessons initiate without the community and without me kind of holding the spokes together. So I wanted to make sure I had a chance to ask you about that, because, we're making a clear statement about how challenging the transformation process is, but that could scare a lot of people.
Yes. Yeah. And we definitely have, the community aspect is so important. And I think also it helps us to be joyful right, about it, not only to share the load but to create joy. And that's a big part of what we do is we celebrate the cycles, we celebrate the wheel of the year together. We have all kinds of meetings and places where we're holding hands, so to speak, where we're holding each other up. And of course there's a community people can drop into 24/7 and talk to everybody. But you're right, like it takes a whole tribe to come together. And that's why that was so important to me, especially knowing the nature of women being very community oriented and being so cyclical, right? We work in cycles. And I think men are much more linear and women are much more cyclical, like you said, an arrow and a circle. And so having women on a rhythm, that's one of the things we do to alleviate the difficulty, is helping women get on their rhythms, helping women work in their cycles, not just the internal cycle, but the external cycle, right? Working with the patterns of the moon, working with the patterns of the seasons, the equinoxes and the solstices, and helping those patterns really help to alleviate some of the stress, because we can sit back and we can know, okay, the time for change will come, right? The moon is constant, but she's always changing. And just allowing yourself to be like the moon, like you can change, but just knowing it's consistent, right? Sit back when it's time to wane and go forward when it's time to wax. And that's what we help women do in our community.
I think, too, as a therapist and someone with a fair bit of experience in this area, when we achieve a good level of just baseline health, we are inherently aware of the energies and the pulls. Like, I can feel where the moon's at without even looking at it. I mean, I know what the moon's doing. I charge my water and the moon is the primary influence. I can tell you by tasting the water where the moon's at. Mm-hmm. But the point is that when we're healthy, because we are nature and we're largely water, so the moon's pulling on us all the time. But it's one thing to teach those cycles to an unhealthy person because they have to have something external to themselves as a reference point to say, oh, look at the moon, it's almost full moon, versus paying attention to what a woman's body is telling her. And we shouldn't need alarm clocks to wake us up. We should be immediately awoken by the sun. We shouldn't need to be reminded to eat, and we shouldn't be in a situation where we forgot to eat. Those are all indications of derealization, being very out of touch with your body, because your body is nature. Mm-hmm. So in other words, we have to find the balance. Sometimes you got to start external and teach people what they should be feeling for and looking for, but then you got to help them come into themselves so that they can recognize where the moon's at inside of themselves, or these, all these other many things that we're talking about.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's part of the ritual stuff that we work with, because ritual can really help you attune to your native intuition, right? Exactly what you're talking about, attune to where the earth is at. And it can support you in understanding, and that embodiment piece also, right? Help you understanding how those pools, what they feel like. And so we try to pull that in so that, yes, there's an external piece that people are looking at, but we're always helping people be guided by their intuition too. And it's so funny you said that, Paul, because today, I mean, I don't know when this airs, but today I was like, it must be the new moon tomorrow. Like it must be, because I can just feel it. And of course, sure enough, tomorrow's the new moon. And that pull is just very visceral once you can understand it and feel it.
One of the things that very few people think about is that ritual is very, very heavily linked to the rhythm, pressure, and flow aspects of the body. So think of rhythm, pressure, and flow. If the flow of your day is too intense, it causes high blood pressure. Your heart speeds up, you feel pressurized. It's like you're, dealing with a crisis of some kind. Oh my God, I'm not going to make it here. The traffic's too heavy. Oh, my son's going to be late for band practice. And so breathing gets shallow and fast without going through all the whole systems. But, there's a natural transit time from mouth to anus for food. There's retention time. There's menstrual cycles. There's normal bowel movement cycles, urination cycles, breathing cycles, circulatory pressures, blood pressure. So what I find through my work, and have been teaching this for many, many years, is that if we don't have rituals to stabilize us, and rituals like eating breakfast and lunch and dinner, and some say, oh, you don't need to eat 3 meals a day. Yeah, well, you know what? If you don't need to eat, then go sit there with people that are eating and drink some water, because the ritual creates a stabilizing factor. And so if our external rituals are chaotic, our internal rhythm, pressures, and flow mirror that chaotic energy. And that leads to all sorts of drug prescriptions and health problems and headaches and neck pain and back pain and digestive disorders, eliminative disorders, etc. So really, what I'm saying in a nutshell is that it's very, very important to teach people healthy rituals, because if they don't have healthy rituals in their daily life, the rhythm, pressure, and flow systems of their body go into a state of chaos that mirrors the stress created by lacking ritual. But most mothers that I have worked with are like, I look at their daily schedule and what they've got to do, and just the thought of it kills me. I mean, I'm a busy, productive guy, but I've seen women who are like booked like doctors with 50 patients a day, and they're trying to rush from appointment to appointment and pick up socks and do laundry and you know, all this other stuff. And you know, a lot of them come to me with, you know, quite serious health problems. And I'm like, wow, you know, there's a lot of things I can do for you. But the first thing I have them do is I say, you bring in a monthly calendar and show me what you got going on. And we're going to create 4 doctors sacred time. You're going to block out the times a day that you eat. You're going to block out when you're going to exercise. You're going to block out what time you should be going to bed. You know, if you don't make that part of your life sacred, then you will forever be feeding the medical system, and you will forever have problems, and it'll be very, very hard for you to embody yourself, because there's a threshold where when people reach enough level of stress, they externalize the soul. They don't want to be inside anymore. They want to escape themselves. And that's when you have to drink alcohol to get to bed, or smoke pot, or do some kind of drug to sleep or to stay awake, or both. And you know, all of this really has to begin with healthy rituals, or you're always treating symptoms. You're never getting to the actual problem. And many people say to me, well, I can't do that. I won't have time to go to, how can I do that? I won't be able to work as much to make enough money. You know, there's a long line of excuses. And I say, well, how much money are you spending to see me? And you've just seen 25 doctors in the last 3 years. How much time did that take you? Right? So they don't have a common sense view of their own life, and their sense of value is distorted. I'm like, okay, well, sell one of your cars and lower your overhead so you can actually start living, or you're going to, you know, 50% of a person's life savings is spent in the last 5 days of a hospital on average. Mm-hmm. The hospital will drain you of your finances. Mm-hmm. The number one cause of bankruptcy worldwide today is medical costs. Yep. It's like, my point is if you don't have time to set your life up so you can live, well, you will have time to die real slowly, and it'll be very expensive. Yep. So these are critical concepts.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. My family and I love Organifi's green juices. You can get your green juice in 2 excellent flavors, crisp apple and original mint. Not only are these products made with certified organic ingredients to support your family's nutritional needs, they each have some unique benefits. Your green juice crisp apple eases stress with an effective dose of 600 milligrams of ashwagandha per serving. Helps reduce cortisol spikes that increase snacking urges and aids keeping your blood sugar balanced. Why snack on inferior foods that lack nutrition and often lead to blood sugar spikes followed by blood sugar crashes when Organifi's green juices are super healthy, taste great, and are as quick to make as opening the package and adding water.
Your green juice crisp apple is made from fresh apples picked right off the branch and are packed with micronutrients to support your body's needs. Green juice original mint contains ashwagandha, chlorella, and spirulina. Reset your body every morning with 11 detoxifying superfoods. You'll love the delicious taste, and your body will feel strong and stable with all the micronutrients in each serving. Green juice original mint promotes balanced cortisol and stress levels, perfect for weight management, and helps rid the body of harmful toxins. Personally, I'm super grateful that Organifi makes such excellent, easy-to-use drinks and foods that keep us energized, healthy, and clean inside while decreasing the urge to crave on inferior snack foods. My kids love both flavors, and I love knowing that we can all be healthy together with Organifi's excellent crisp apple and original mint green juices. These products are excellent for work, on the road, sharing with friends, and anytime you need a nutritious boost that tastes good. To get your crisp apple and original mint green juices, go to organifi.com/Chek20. That's Organifi.com/Chek20. Save 20% on your purchase using the code Chek20, all caps, on checkout. Don't worry if you forget your Living 4D discount code, because you'll see it right there on the landing page. Enjoy Organifi's excellent green juices.
So, Julie, you wanted to share something about ritual that we didn't cover, so feel free.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think it's really important that you framed ritual that way, Paul, because most people, when they think about ritual, they think about like lighting candles or wearing, people in hoods or like whatever. And you can, of course, incorporate anything you want into your personal rituals. But I think it's important for people to understand ritual as like their rhythms. A ritual is something that we do over and over again to give it meaning, to remember the meaningfulness of it. And a habit is something we do over and over again because we're not thinking. Rituals make you think, habits are not thinking. And
Go
go ahead.
ahead. I was just going to add another layer to that. What I teach my students and patients, rituals are there to remind us of what is sacred. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing more sacred than taking care of yourself, because you can't do it if you don't take care of your environment. And that's sacred, because without the environment, there's no you. Without your health, there's less and less of you. So this is why I teach people, look, we got to look at your schedule and we got to get your ritual dialed in, because we have to make sacred time for you. And that means you don't try to work while you're eating, and you actually got to get clear on what the sacred is. And the sacred is ultimately what keeps you alive and gives life meaning and gives it heart. That's critical for everyone to understand, male or female. And if men don't support their women in creating sacred, healthy rituals, well, they're all doomed. The relationship will fall apart, because there will be such a values gap, it'll destroy the relationship, and the kids will be caught right in the middle of the crossfire, and their lives will be all screwed up.
Yep. It's very, very important. Ritual is important for everyone. And you have rituals whether you think you have them or not.
Well, they're either working for you or they're working against you.
Yep.
They're either human and natural, or they're technologically, electronically, gadget, media programming, and then they just turned you into a robot. You don't even need to go through the transhumanism movement. You've already done it.
Right. Yep. Exactly.
And you're highly profitable to these corporate entities, which is a very dangerous way to live. I wanted to ask you, because I know you have your archetype hovers. I mean, your teaching program, your alchemy program, is moving around key archetypes. Why do you think understanding archetypes is so important to the alchemical process that you're teaching?
Yeah, archetypes are super important because they're tangible. They help us understand what something looks like. And I love to use the example, right? Lacey Phillips talks about this, but this idea of expanders, and that, for a long time, no one could break a 4-minute mile until someone did it. And then they had that example, and then everyone could break the 4-minute mile, or like Everest, no one could mount Everest, but then now everybody does it every day. And why do they do that? Because we've been expanded by what we've seen. And
Yeah.
archetypes help us so much because they are tangible expressions of what we're trying to become or what we're trying to embody. And that's why we include them so much in the membership, because like we talked about before, we have archetypes that we're seeing on the TV. We have archetypes that we're getting in media, but they're not the archetypes that we want to embody. And so many of us are missing true divine feminine and divine masculine energy in our lives. We don't know what that looks like. So we need archetypes. We need something tangible to look to so we can understand how to embody it, and we can understand, the highs, the lows, the follies, what things might look like. It helps us to really step into that energy.
Well, another thing about archetypes that very few people are aware of, but Jung makes very clear in his teachings, is that archetypes act through our instinctual systems and drives. So if you're engaging the wrong archetypes that relative to the natural instincts and drive, let's look at some common instincts: the instinct to breathe, the instinct to eat, the instinct to urinate and defecate, the instinct to rest, the instinct to move your body, the instinct to love, the instinct to seek warmth and shelter and safety, the instinct to be creative, which is an instinct in a human being. So if the way you're living and the archetypes you're engaging are taking you out of harmony with your capacity to listen to your instincts, then you end up with people that show up for a doctor's check to find out they got stage 3 or stage 4 cancer and tumors the size of grapes. Well, or size of oranges? How could anybody have something growing that big in their body and not notice, for example, unless you're just very out of touch with your instincts, because the instincts are the wisdom of the body telling you how to live. And if the way you're being informed or misinformed is leading you out of touch with your instincts, it means you have potentially got an archetypal possession, and that's very dangerous.
Yeah, definitely. And, these archetypes help us to reattach to the proper instincts, just like you said, to help align ourselves with our instinctual selves. And also they teach us about, not everything is so black and white. They can help us see like these dark pieces of ourselves and help them come back into ourselves, help us integrate them back into ourselves in a way where we're not feeling shame anymore or that pain anymore, so we can be more of our whole selves as well.
Yeah. Julie, there's a direct relationship between archetypes and myth. There are many profound myths that deal with the relationship between females and males, husbands and wives, kings and queens, etc. How important do you feel it is to understand the core teachings of myth today, and how can understanding myth enhance the alchemy between men and women? That's a very important area of study for me, and unfortunately it's a very deep field of study. Unfortunately means that you can't. You have to learn in layers, because the depth of both understanding archetypes and myths is significant, largely because we've lost our elders. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so hard. It would be natural. This is what I love about the Waldorf school system, is they really teach sacred ritual, rhythm, myth, and archetype and story, and that's got to be part of a child's education system, and the public education system has nothing on that.
Yeah. And, we're made up of stories, right? Like,
Yeah.
our whole
Like it or
lives are
not.
stories. Yeah. Like it or not, our whole lives are stories. Everything in our world, the foundation of that, we can trace it back to the stories that we've told, even these ancient myths. And so understanding the ancient myths and the dynamics between men and women in these can help us understand what is happening right now to us. And exactly what you said was going to be my answer is, we've lost our ancient wisdom. We've lost our elders. We've lost lost our rites of passage. We've lost so much of what we had. And now studying these myths can take us back to that. It can help us to become more our whole, worthy, authentic selves because it gives us something to look to. You know, every story is not just a story. The story is
No.
there to transmit a message, a meaning, right? Just like a symbol is not just one meaning. A symbol has layers and layers and layers. A story has layers and layers and layers. And they're meant to help us remember, right? Like these myths are here to help us remember what we've forgotten and to help us dig down into these layers so we can find ourselves again. And I mean, I will say, obviously, the winners of history get to write the stories. And that's the truth. The winners of history get to write the stories. So maybe not all of our myths. I do think some of our myths have been tampered with over time, but we can go back to the originality of that and we can see what was truly there from the beginning and understand. And I think the more myth that you study, the more you see the overlap between different myths and different stories. And that overlap helps you to recognize, okay, what's the truth? What am I supposed to be learning here? And, you know, what can I apply to myself? So that's why it's important to dig into these.
If you have listened to even one episode of Paul's podcast before, then you will know that he is passionate, and some would say even fanatical, about the quality of the food he eats and where it is sourced from. That is why the Chek household only eats pasture-raised meat, wild-caught fish, and organic produce. And that is why we subscribe to Wild Pastures meat delivery service. Each month, Wild Pastures delivers a box of meat that has been raised by family farmers in the USA using regenerative farming practices. 100% grass-fed and finished beef, pasture-raised chicken, and pasture-raised pork, as well as wild-caught seafood. You can customize the selection in your box, add on extra when you know you will be feeding more people, or change your options each and every month. You might be thinking that this will be too expensive for you, but Wild Pasture's mission is to offer the highest quality meat at the lowest prices because they want to transform the meat industry. And that means that more people need to be able to choose meat that is raised right. Their pasture-raised animals are part of a natural ecosystem. Their farmers use rotational grazing, practices that mimic nature, and so do not need to use synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, hormones, or antibiotics. This beautiful process doesn't require the external resources, such as massive amounts of GMO grain, required with environmentally depleting conventional methods. And best of all, the meat and fish taste amazing. And for Paul's listeners, Wild Pastures are offering you 20% off your subscription for life, $15 off your first order, and free shipping. Seriously, you can't find a better deal for top quality pasture-raised meat. Go to wildpastures.com/Paul Chek. You don't need a promo code. Just visit wildpastures.com/Paul Chek and start choosing the goodies you will have delivered to you in your first box.
Yeah, most myths work around common archetypal motifs, but one thing I want to share in this regard as to why myths are so important is because myths are the stories that convey what human beings have learned throughout the entire span of human existence, because myths goes all the way back to the beginning of language and possibly even before language, because myth and ritual are very connected. Mm-hmm. But when you study myth, honestly, not in a university course that's bastardizing it and chopping it up and trying to evaluate it scientifically, that's like trying to read poetry as prose. It means you've completely missed the point. But myths tell the stories of what happens when you do this too much or not enough. Myth tells the story of when you don't love your spouse, or you don't honor and respect your neighbor, or etc., or you don't have virtues, morals, and values to guide you. And so the fact that today our culture equates the word myth as the equivalent of or synonymous with the word lie shows you how completely and utterly detached we are from the greatest treasure trove of wisdom ever produced by our entire ancestral tree. And so it's so important for what you're doing to have this in there, because otherwise it just becomes information. And information without a grounding rod is dangerous.
Definitely. Yeah. Because information can just so easily be twisted, right? We
Oh,
can
yeah.
twist information any which way we want, but when there's a core story, it makes it much more difficult to twist, right? The meaning is hard to separate from that story, and it gives us those deeper clues to who we are and what we're looking at. Can I
Yeah.
give an example of this actually?
Please. Yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
it's a great one. I think it's a great one. But we can see this actually a lot in the Bible. And I've been working with some scholars like J. David Butler and other people who are tearing away this narrative that like the Israelite people never had a goddess figure. They obviously had and worshipped a goddess figure. Now we know her name's Asherah. We found her statues everywhere around the Jewish temples and things like that. But we see like Margaret Barker and other scholars have gone through and looked at the Bible and peeled it back and seen, oh, the reason this story doesn't make sense is because they've turned the she of God in this context into a he. And it wasn't a he originally, it was a she. And what they're talking about doesn't make sense. They've tried to twist the story into information, but you can tell that something's off about it. And that's the power of stories, is that the truth is lying underneath there. And you can tell when something's off in a story, when it doesn't make sense, because that story encases its full meaning. Whereas just information, we could just gloss it over and change all, like what they're trying to do right now is change all the language, right? From she and he to it's and theys and, inseminated person rather than a mother.
Cats and dogs and
Yes,
whatever
cats
else.
and dogs and whatever else. Information is really easy to shift and twist and change, but stories cannot be fully changed.
I saw the funniest clip on Instagram on this. Speaking of this cop pulls a guy over who is obviously confused about his gender. And the cop addresses him as sir. And he says to the cop, "You must address me by my, what is it called, pronoun or something like that? I'm a cat."
Oh, yeah.
And he starts giving the cop a lecture about this. And the cop says, "Well, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to arrest you because it's illegal for cats to drive cars."
That's right.
I just thought that was perfect. Oh my God. But I just have so much empathy for people that are caught in all this, because did you ever read Pottinger's Cats?
No, I didn't.
Oh my God, Julie, you've got to read. It's a little book. You'll get through it in 3.5 or so hours. Go to the Weston A. Price or just go on Amazon and buy Pottinger's Cats, because it's a study of 900 cats done over 10 years. And he started them off. One group just got raw milk and raw meat, which is the normal diet of a cat. And the other group got cooked meat and pasteurized milk of 4 different grades. By the 3rd generation, the pasteurized milk and cooked meat cats had severe birthing problems, death on birth, psychological abnormalities. They could not differentiate male from females, and the males and females started trying to have sex with each other. They lost their athletic ability. They had high rates of disease. And it took him 4 generations of refeeding raw milk and raw meat to get them back to where they started. So if you look at where we started with processed food, it was around, depends on what your description of processed food, but it really started around the First World War. And then after the Second World War, the processed food industry boomed. So if you say, okay, 1945, if we just start there, and the average person's having kids somewhere between 20 and 25 years of age, how many generations would that be now? Like 5 or 6 generations at least of just crap food. So my point is when you read what happened to the cats in detail, it's exactly what's happening to human beings right now. And then you got Bill genius Gates trying to get everybody to eat genetically modified garbage and insects and crap. So clearly they're just trying to get humanity to submit to total control and lose their freedoms and lose their common sense and lose their any ability to take, to have free will and to have sovereignty and agency. But the point being is when we're telling stories about someone who's getting pulled over by the cops and insists he's a cat, it really shows you how seriously dangerous of a situation humanity is in right now and why courses like this are so important.
Yeah, having those archetypes and those myths to look back to, right? Having that story and not just saying it's information and trying to dissect it, but understanding the deeper meaning helps us not to get so lost. That's part of the reason that we're lost right now. I mean, all these other reasons, all the food and the water and the plastic and the everything is all the reason, but our stories are what took us. Not having our stories and our myths are part of what really took us away from that.
Yeah, totally. Because once you lose myth, you lose moral integrity, and you lose virtue. And most of the Greek myths have something to do with the laws of morality or virtue.
Yeah.
And they're quite profound. I've been studying Greek myth for a while, and one of the guys I've had on my podcast twice, Latau Wang, has written some excellent books on it, and he's a fun guy because he's so deep. But what archetypes and myths are you including in your Feminine Alchemist membership program, if you could kind of just give us a general broad stroke idea?
Yeah, there are a lot that we will go through, especially because we will be connecting those in depth with symbols of the feminine. I've actually been on a big journey to find as many divine feminine symbols as possible. I'm up to 60. I'm past 60 now. Yeah, I've been really digging in, but all of those are connected with an archetype, right? All of those are connected with a myth. So there's a bunch of myths, but I think the main one that we should really touch on is Maiden, Mother, Crone, because that is very important for the life cycle of a woman and understanding her different roles throughout her life and her rites of passages, how she works in the world. Now, we actually in our school do something a little bit different, which is we break it down not into the triple goddess of Maiden, Mother, and Crone, which for people who don't know, often that's associated with a goddess named Hecate, who was part of the Celtic tradition, and she's part of a lot of the Celtic myths and Greek myths. Also, Hecate is kind of she's basically the intercessory person between Demeter and Persephone. She helps out in that exchange, but she's known as the triple goddess. That she has three faces: one is a maiden, one is a mother, and one is a crone. And this triple goddess is really important in traditions like Wicca for understanding the wheel of the year and how our lives turn and what happens to us as we get older, our rites of passages as women. But I've actually now broken down this into the quadruple goddess, which we talk about as the maiden, the mother, the medicine woman, and the matriarch, because the medicine woman, I would say, is around, if we talk about like the maiden being a young woman until she has a child, and then the mother being up until menopause, that medicine woman is that menopausal and perimenopausal woman, right? That really never gets much light shown on her. That's really pushed down in society. But the time of menopause for women is so important because it's a time when many of them learn how to stand in their truth. And I'm sure, Paul, you've had experience, like so many women probably come to you when they're during that menopause phase, because they're like, I'm done with this crap. I'm done with everything. And so that medicine woman, she's there to show us our medicine, like what we need to say no to. She's there to tell us enough is enough. She's there to own her true self. And then the matriarch is more of that grandmother figure who's there taking care of the tribe, leading them, right? Doing the orca thing, right? Orcas are one of the other animals who have grandmothers, and the grandmother orca leads the tribe and helps them. And so those are the four big archetypes we're working with universally because they're so important to women's development.
Yeah, very important. Sex is probably the original form of alchemy between men and women, which leads to both great union and great challenges if it's not handled correctly. Can you share your thoughts on the alchemy of sex and why we have so much, with, to use an alchemical term, separatio between the sexes?
Yeah, this is a really important for me to talk about because I've been going through my own alchemical process when it comes to sex. I am one of those 1 in 4 women that was abused as a kid
Mm-hmm.
sexually. And so for me, a long time, it wasn't that me and my husband couldn't have good sex or I couldn't orgasm or something like that couldn't happen, but there wasn't the full divine union because there was part of me that was still broken, afraid. And I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of women and men are suffering right from this separatio is because so many women have been told a lie about their sexuality, right? They've been objectified, they've been shown their body's the only important part of it. Men have been sold this lie about the way that they have to go, and I'll be 100% honest, I am not a fan of pornography. It's just so linked into human trafficking and other things like that. But that men have been sold this lie about the macho-ness and how they're supposed to be in a union, and it's really separated men and women in the ways that they are. Women have been told they're not, they shouldn't be sexual beings. Men have never been taught how to help and please a woman, right? So there's so many societal norms, quote unquote norms, that have brought us
Snafu.
away. Yes, that have totally brought us apart from each other. But
Mm-hmm.
the divine feminine and the divine masculine, like you said, that intersection of men and women coming together is never as potent as it is when you're actually uniting your bodies in sexual intercourse. And
Yeah.
I really think it's important. Something that's really helped me actually a lot in this process of healing, there's a couple things. One, I had challenged myself to, and I think a lot of women are scared, and maybe men are scared to do this too, but to look at myself naked in the mirror and to tell my body that I loved it,
Good
no matter.
idea.
Yeah, for
One of the
60 days.
first things I ask my patients is, can you look yourself in the eyes in the mirror and say, I love you and mean it? And I'd say 98% of them can't do it. So that's one of the first practices I give them, and say,
Totally.
look, until you can love your body, it's never going to reach its potential to heal, because there's always a battle going on. There's always a crisis of self going on. But yeah, that's a very important exercise.
Yeah, and I think something that happens, I think, particularly when women have been abused, is they get really scared of some of the power dynamics of sexuality. That can be
Mm-hmm.
really hard for them. And something that really has helped me, and I think that could help so many men and women, is having some actual intention to your sexuality. And like in the
Mm-hmm.
movies, we're always sold that like, oh, it's this sudden thing, and like all of a sudden we're just having sex now and we're all rolling all over the bed and doing all the things, instead of like thinking about it and putting some intention into it. A lot of people talk about this like sex magic, and using sex to bring to pass your intentions in the world or to manifest something. But I think in bringing intention into sexuality is so important, because it does something for men and for women that's really important, which is it creates a sacred container. If you're going to
Yeah.
bring intention into something, then you have to create a sacred container for a woman to feel safe. And that safety leads to better sex and better abilities to enjoy each other and to also take the process more slowly, because we know this, like men are like microwaves, women are like crock pots. They need time to warm up. And a lot of times that gets lost when we see all these archetypes of this really fast sex, right? Like everything has to be fast, and it has to be right now. And that it doesn't mean that that's not enjoyable sometimes, but I think creating a container for women to feel safe and making it a little bit more methodical, a little bit more intentional, creates that time for women to really warm up and enjoy themselves during that process.
Well, what you're describing links back to another problem, and it's a lot of insecurity in just communicating your wants, feelings, and needs to your partner. And I think from my experience with women, is very few of them are forthright with what is sexually pleasing with them in any given encounter. They just tend to take whatever they're given, but then complain about it later. And that can really be disruptive to a man because, I think I just know, like, I can't say for men in general, I can only say the men that I hang out with, which are healthy men. I don't know a single one of my friends that isn't really interested in pleasing and pleasuring his wife or partner. And it's very painful when a man maybe has a wham bam type sexual experience because maybe he's horny and, it can be, having a hard erection can be quite uncomfortable. It's something you don't want to just walk around with and say, oh, geez, this is cool. Let me hang some donuts on this thing,
Yeah.
So there's a natural kind of intensity to the urgency of a man. But I mean, I know whenever a woman said to me, I'd like a slow love session today, or could you just start by just massaging me, or whatever it is that they want, that's fantastic. I mean, nothing's more unfulfilling to me than leaving the bed and having my partner not feel sexually satisfied and connected to. But when I'm simply stating, and I know it's a fact because of the thousands of people I work, women have a real hard time just being honest about what they need to feel loved and pleasured. And I think the other half of it is men maybe have a hard time listening or asking.
Yeah.
And so you see when these two meet, you get, well, what can happen is you get children out of sexual intercourse that's not heart connected. And I think that has a big effect on the child for the rest of its life. There's Angie tells me that some native cultures believe that the quality of the sex has a huge influence on the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual development of the child. It's sort of the milieu that it enters into the physical world. So if it's rape, it's a real, dangerous, bad situation. And if it's really, loving intimacy, just think of the difference. If you just happen to walk into the wrong hotel door and you walked in on someone being raped, how it would affect you, versus if you walked in the room where a couple was just really genuinely expressing love for each other. Even though it might be embarrassing, you would have been witness to love versus witness to abuse.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, having these sacred containers is really important because here's the thing is we have this culture, and again, this might be offensive to people, but we have this culture that's very much like, okay, go have sex with someone after seeing them for 1 hour, being with them and knowing them for 1 hour. And it's,
Part of that is the masculinization of women. You realize that,
yeah.
right?
Oh, totally. Totally. 100%. And when we live in that kind of world, just like you described, it's really difficult for women to be open about what brings them pleasure. And I mean, obviously, this is not just the only problem. We have this problem of, like I said, these archetypes of, what we see on the screen. And I think porn brings this too, that like women are just satisfied all the time and they feel, everything feels good. And then you go into it yourself and you're like, oh, this does not feel like what I thought it was going to feel like. This does not feel good to me, but I don't know. We have that fear around saying no, because the archetype we see, right, is that like fast lovemaking, or like lovemaking that, is, where the woman's super into it and she's not saying no to anything. She's not asking for her needs to be met. We don't really have an archetype of that. No one teaches us that. And we don't have it in our culture.
Well,
because,
I got to help you there.
Yeah.
You need to read the book Voices of the First Day by Robert Lawler, which is all about the Aboriginal culture. And they had probably the most advanced system for teaching sex and love And without describing the whole thing, because it would take too long, but honestly, you really should read it. It's very, very profound. They're
Yeah.
miles ahead of the rest of the world and the other cultures from what I've studied. But typically, an Aboriginal man in a tribal society cannot get married till between 35 and 40 years of age. And what they did was all the young men were encouraged to have sex with the married women. And until every woman in the tribe voted that he had learned how to pleasure, honor, love, and respect a woman, he could not get married. So they trained the young men how to love, pleasure, honor, and respect women. And it took about 35 to 40 years of age before they got, the average man could get the blessing of all the women in the tribe.
Wow.
And there's much more to it. They even talk about how they train the children from the earliest ages. I mean, it's so evolved compared to what goes on in the world today. It's one of the things that breaks my heart when you consider how many native cultures, white men in particular, and Spaniards, but have been wiped out, particularly by white men, and just destroyed, because we actually destroyed the very wisdom that would have kept us healthy.
Yeah. And it's really sad because we see, we've got the effects now, right? We can see all the effects. We see the fruits of what's been happening. And I think, we need to be more like the Aborigines and these tribes in being open and teaching women how to be open. And I think part of that is we've had this culture that has been so hush hush about sex for so long, and you can't talk about it, you can't speak about it. I was just with some women. I did a retreat with some women, and we talked about menarche, which is, for people who don't know, that's women's first bleed. Your first bleed is called menarche. And so many of these women, older women particularly, talked about how no one had ever told them what was going to happen to their body. No one, they thought they were dying when they started bleeding because no one had told them anything. And sex is no different. No one teaches you anything unless you have parents. Like, my parents were pretty good at this, but my mom was a nurse, and it was all just about like anatomy and here's your anatomy, and this is what happens. But I was lucky to have that. So many people don't grow up with, understanding how to help each other, how to express their needs, how to have a healthy sexual relationship, because we're so scared of talking about it. And we, really shove it under the rug as that scary, scary thing.
Well, you've just touched on something that I unfortunately have a fair bit of experience with as a clinician. One, I'm trained in intrapelvic therapy and have done a lot of helped countless people with pelvic floor injuries, sex injuries, and all kinds of stuff. But one of the things that shocked me as a therapist, the first time it happened, it was shocking. But after about 20 times, remember, I've been doing this for 41 years, so I've worked with a lot of people. I have met many women who were complaining to me about the low quality of their partner's sexual performance. And I would ask them, well, do you tell them what you need to orgasm? Because the biggest complaint that I have had with women is I can't orgasm. And you know what? One of the very common answers I get is, I don't know. And I say, well, how is it that you don't know how to give yourself an orgasm? The most common answer, I'm Christian, and it's a sin to touch my genitals. I've met countless women in my career. When I say countless, I'm being a bit exaggerating, probably 20. And if one therapist am meeting 20, there's a lot of them out there. And they have been programmed to believe that it's dirty and nasty and you should never do that. And the other thing that shocked me is how many females do not have any understanding of their own vagina, their own.
Oh, yes.
They don't know the difference between the thickness of the mucus when they're ovulating. I mean, to give you an example of how bad it is, I had one of my patients who is in her 40s or maybe mid 40s, was very embarrassed to ask me for help with this, but she says, my daughter has a problem. She can't hold a boyfriend, and she's lost about 5 boyfriends now, and she wants to have sex, and I think it's time for her to explore that, but she can't get any of these young men to have sex with her. So her mother wouldn't tell me what's wrong, but she brought her daughter to me. I think she was 18, like first year in college. And I said, well, what do you think's the problem? And she says, my vagina smells really bad, and I don't know what to do about it. Well, she had a vaginal yeast infection. And so here, her mother didn't know what was going on. And, it's just like, so here's an 18-year-old girl. And when I started talking to her, she did not know anything about her sex organs. She didn't know anything. And here she is 18 and, obviously out of balance. And like when you see that stuff routinely in a clinical practice and you understand what that really points to, and you see how often that comes from religious programming, it's one of the reasons that I have a very, very hard time with religion, because it's, for all the beauties and benefits of it, it has been co-opted and become extremely destructive to the physical, emotional, and mental development of human beings. And you can tell how badly confused the Christians are, because currently there's 45,000 branches of Christianity, each claiming to have the original teachings of Jesus. So there's no unity, there's no common understanding. That's exactly what happens when you get a myth in the hands of a lawyer and they start breaking it up and turning it into something else. So now you've got 45,000 derivations on the teachings of Jesus, which is a glaring sign that people are completely, utterly lost and confused about what Christianity is. And that ripples right through the family, because people's religion is the basis of their value system, their ethics and their morals. And Jung states very clearly the imago Dei archetype, image of deity, is the archetype from which all other archetypes emerge. So your beliefs about God are the strongest influence on every other archetype in your psyche. So part of getting women healthy is clarifying a lot of religious confusion, unfortunately. So get ready for that.
Well, yeah. And I think especially around this sex piece, right? Now in schools, because we should be doing this in our families, right? Like we should be doing this in our communities and not, taking this to an outside teacher or school to teach our children. But that's what's happening, right? Parents don't actually teach their kids what's happening to their bodies. They outsource that to a school system, and the school system has all to say about what men and women learn about their bodies and about their cycles and about sex. And we need to bring back this culture of being honest and open and understanding, right, our bodies. And like I said, that's why I said I was lucky I was raised by a nurse, because she was able to even talk to me about my anatomy. But I have, exactly like you, I know so many women who know nothing about their anatomy. It's not quite as straightforward as male anatomy, where it's like, well, here's the penis, here's the ball sack. You aim, you shoot, right? But the vulva is just much more complex, and even science has had a hard time, identifying it, talking about it for years and years and years. And so now here we are.
And ask yourself, what's the influence on that?
Yeah.
Religion.
Yeah, there's so many of this, like, I think a lot of people use the term like purity culture, right? There's so much of this around that we haven't been able to properly help women understand themselves, and we have disconnected this divine union because of that, right? Men are dissatisfied with sex, women are dissatisfied with sex. Then, like you said, it affects the birth of the children. It's such a huge reason for people to get divorced or to have a really hard time in their relationships.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just so important and that's the whole point with what we're doing, is helping women to understand themselves, and that it's okay to understand your bodies, to be able to have this alchemical union.
I want to just mention right away, too, there's a friend of mine who is very, very skilled in pelvic floor therapy and teaching women, how to really relate to their sex parts and pleasure themselves and orgasm. Her name's Emily Abbott. And I have a great podcast with her that's kind of wild because we share some of my wild sex experiences in there. But Emily's another example of a type of educator that's way lacking in our culture. So if any of the women want to learn how to get deeper into themselves and understand themselves, explore themselves from someone who's a trained pelvic floor therapist and sex educator, highly recommend my podcast with Emily Abbott, Abbott, I believe it is, or Abbott. Shouldn't be hard to find if you search. It'll be Living 4D with Paul Chek because it was before I changed it. But you could just go to the Chek Institute website, click podcast tab, then search Emily Abbott, and it should pop up right away. Fantastic podcast, and she does private consulting and coaching with people. She does work via the web. I've referred clients to her. It's important women know there is help out there.
Yeah, pelvic floor therapy was like a lifesaver for me personally, but so many women don't even know it exists or how to do that work. And lots of times the issues we have around sex or the pain is literally just our muscles and working with our muscles to help them. And we just don't know how to do that.
Most people nowadays have some trouble with poor blood sugar balance from stress, inactivity, and suboptimal sleep. Or if you're like me, you get too busy and skip a meal and then get so hungry that you crave sugar, stimulants, or a quick fix snack. But the blood sugar roller coaster that this creates is just not good for your body and can cause your cells to become resistant, and that may lead to belly fat, metabolic syndrome, cardiovascular diseases, and many more issues. Berberine breakthrough by Bioptimizers can significantly blunt those sugar cravings and help avoid the energy roller coaster. Stabilizing your blood sugar balance has so many other positive benefits, including supporting a healthy hormone balance, elevating your mood, and keeping brain function healthy. Glucose is also a type of oxidizing sugar, which means high blood glucose can increase oxidative stress and accelerate aging. So if you want to live a long and healthy life, you want to keep your blood sugar even-keeled. Berberine Breakthrough by Bioptimizers is clinically tested to potently normalize blood sugar response and is an invaluable tool in your nutritional toolbox. Spirit Gym with Paul Chek listeners can get 10% off their purchase of Bioptimizers Berberine Breakthrough by going to bioptimizers.com/Spirit Gym and use the code PAUL10 at checkout. Bioptimizers offer a 365-day best product ever or your money back guarantee, so you have nothing to lose and everything to gain by trying Berberine Breakthrough. That's bioptimizers.com/Spirit Gym and use the code PAUL10 at checkout for 10% off.
I worked, as I said, in the largest physical therapy clinic in San Diego with 22 therapists and me. And I was the only one trained in pelvic floor therapy, which I got trained in neuromuscular therapy training before the Florida Medical Board shut them down. But I used to ask these guys, why have you not taken training in pelvic floor therapy? And the most common answer I got is, I would never stick my fingers up somebody's ass or in their crotch or whatever. They were so childish and insecure. And I think the only country that I know of in the world that teaches pelvic floor therapy in their physical therapy training is the Danish. They're the only ones I've ever met, and I've worked all over the world. And most physical therapists have a sort of a that's dirty type attitude. And that just goes to show you the immaturity and the kind of childish nature. And again, this also comes back to religious ideology and beliefs of what you should and shouldn't touch. I'm like, my God, so you're willing to let... I give you a quick case history. There was a lady that came to our clinic for 3 years. She wasn't my patient, but I watched this woman coming in and out, and they were always working on her chronic SI joint problem and coccyx pain. And finally, after 3 years, the senior physical therapist said, look, this girl's had 130, I think it was 138 physical therapy visits, and her insurance company was saying, we're not going to pay for this anymore because you're obviously not getting better. I think she only had like 6 visits left before her insurance was going to cut her off. So they said, why don't we let Paul work with her? And so when I got her and I looked through her case and I talked to her and I asked her key questions, I said to her, I don't mean to be invasive with this question, but I have to ask it as a therapist. You have all the symptoms of a sex injury. I said, was this trauma from sex? And she said, yes. I said, and you've got a lot of coccyx pain. Forgive me for asking, but does your husband like anal sex? She said he loves it. And unfortunately, he's very well hung. And she was only like 5'4". And so I had to teach her how to go about this in a safer way, how to prepare herself, so she could teach him how to massage those muscles. But I got her completely healed in less than 6 visits through intrapelvic therapy. And she had seen the therapist for 138 visits. Average cost is $140 to $145 a visit. Do the math on that.
Yeah.
Like, this is the kind of crap I had to witness in my entire professional career. And it all goes back to the same core issues that we've been talking about: religious programming, lack of communication, too much poor quality education, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, what we've been discussing for 2 hours.
Right.
Maybe you could just give us a sort of a snapshot overview of the connection between astrology and what you're doing, because obviously the moon is very intimate with the woman's physiology. That's astrology right there. It's astronomy and astrology. It's not really astronomy because that's just a body of mass floating out there to them. It's really astrology and depth psychology if you want. But how is astrology involved in your program?
Yeah, so like we talked about before, right? After we do a lot of the shedding and learning, we're like, who are we, right? And this is part of, for women, their archetypal journey is we talk about the hero's journey all the time, but the heroine's journey is a descent, a search for the self. So the descent piece, right? You've got to go down, which is that shadow work piece, that shedding everything, all the pain, shame, program shedding. Then there's a search piece, and the search piece is finding who you truly are. All right, we've shed everything. We've got to find who we really are. And then there's an ascent back up, and the ascent is integrating all of that back into yourself. And so during this search piece, when we work with women and men will benefit with this too, is astrology is a tool that we can use to search and find out who we are truly, right? Without any masks, without all the other stuff on us. Who are we? We use astrology, we use human design to help us do this, like the I Ching, Kabbalah, right? We're using all of these systems to help pull in for you to understand you. Obviously, these are just systems and these are just tools. And I honestly love them and numerology and the tarot and all of that because I feel like they cross-check each other. They build us up. They help us understand. But obviously, they're just tools, and your own intuition is going to be the biggest thing. Your personal discovery and meditation. But these tools and astrology help us understand who we truly are. They help us understand the cycles that we're living in and where those cycles are going, as women are cyclical beings. And they help us to see ourselves without all of our biases, if that makes sense.
Well, they also help expand our sphere of self from just being a person in the world to being a citizen of the cosmos.
Right.
And that's a very important spiritual stage of expansion. You can say consciousness goes from I to we or my group to world to cosmos. And because astrology is really a cosmic process, at least galactic, when you really understand the forces and the activity of astrology on the psyche, it's undeniable that we we're citizens of the cosmos, you know? And I
Yeah.
think that's important because there's a lot of existential fear in people that don't have a sense of connection beyond their, you know, immediate family, for example. And that's what led to so many people getting vaccinated that didn't want to get vaccinated, is because they weren't in an adult archetype expression of themselves. So getting extricated from your family is like dying. But somebody who knows themselves to be a citizen of the world and a citizen of the cosmos is far more robust and stable in these kind of tumultuous environments.
Yeah, 100%. It helps us to see, like I said, more outside of ourselves, a broader view of being, you know, ever living, ever part of this grander picture of the cosmos rather than just this person in my life right here. Um, and just rather than one little dot, you can see the whole picture.
Yeah. Why don't you just close up, Julie, by just giving us sort of a sketch of the program structure, how it's run, and where people can learn more about it and join.
Yeah, you can find us at www.femininealchemist. Alchemist, that mist part is spelled MYST, like mystical. Femininealchemist.com. And the structure is split into three. We've got the community, which we call the gathering. We've got the school, which is where we've got these in-depth courses about astrology, human design, courses about archetypes, courses about sacred embodiment, cyclical living. And then we have the third piece, which is the heroine's journey, where we guide you step by step on that heroine's journey. We help you through the initiation. We help you through the descent. We help you through the search, and we help you through the ascent. And each one of those, kind of like you have, Paul, where you have these gates, we have a gate and we have symbols associated with those that you can understand and can become part of you as you travel through this journey. So those are the three parts of the school. We monthly, like I said, we have tons of community support. We do monthly workshops with experts. We do monthly women's circles. We do Wheel of the Year celebrations. We do retreats. And when you're in the community, you get tons and tons and tons of benefits, of course, for all of those. But it is all online and it is work at your own pace, although we do have a lot of these live components and, you know, seasonal journeys that we go on together, which are also live. So that's basically that's the basics of the program. But it will help you understand your heroine's journey. It will help you understand archetypes. It will help you work through your shadow work, and it will help you activate your divine feminine, learn the rituals, the wisdoms, and the rituals and the wisdoms of the feminine, and how to incorporate it into your life and activate your divine feminine within.
Beautiful. Well, super excited you're doing it. I think you and I agree that this is a desperate need, this knowledge and this community and this practice. And I hope that many of the graduates of your program go off into the world and start their own schools of some variation on the theme. But, you know, it's just like we need a lot more real education in the world by people like yourself that are grounded and they're not just teaching intellectually. It's an embodied practice, and you're learning from someone that really understands and lives the teachings. And you know, our whole academic system, you know, it's kind of like there's an old saying in orthopedic surgery: see one, do one, teach one. Well, you know, that's what the academic system's like. We've got a bunch of professors that really never got much time in the field. So it's all just memorization and passing forward what they got. And so you end up getting a lot of like very shallow, impractical education. And I think we need a lot more of this type of education on the planet right now. Well, we can.
I agree 100%. And that's why we're here. So we hope that people will join us, check us out. I have a totally free mini course. I've got free guides. We've got tons of stuff. And if you're a man and you're curious, check it out too, because it can be helpful for you, your daughters, your wives, your friends. And let's rebalance our humanity.
It could be a great gift for a man to at least suggest for his partner, would you like it if I paid for your enrollment in this program, and just have the woman or whoever he's offering it to just go check it out. It might be very exciting for them.
Yeah, totally. And it's a yearly membership. So it's only $297 for the whole year. So it's not
My God,
crazy.
that's a giveaway. How do you do that?
I know it's not a crazy tuition. I know people were probably thinking like, this is thousands of dollars. It's really not. It's not. It's less than $300. We wanted to do that because we want every woman to be able to afford to pay that. And just so people know, that's less than $25 a month to get all of the courses, to get all the support, to get everything. And we do that because we really want to build our community.
Well, I can say for sure your tent doesn't cost as much a month as mine does. If I had a program for that price, I'd have starved to death right out of the gate. But I'm glad you're doing it. I mean, I'm really grateful you're doing that. Thank you, Julie.
Of course. That's what we're here for.
Well, what a great podcast. Wow. I got to hang out with Julie Dean Richards for 2 hours and 29 minutes. So fun. I'm so proud of you, Julie. My God, I whenever I get young tapped in women like you, I'm so grateful. I've had the blessings of getting to work with several of them, and it's so nice to know that there are really great women in the world and younger women that are coming up, because you're carrying the wisdom of an elder, and you're so young. And
Thank you.
Keep doing it.
I'm trying. Thank you for hanging out with me and doing the podcast with me again. I so appreciate it. Well, I love it.
Can't wait for our next one.
Yes, our next one. We'll do a fun one. I'm really excited.
Well, have fun with your nomadic journey.
We will. We're going to come visit you, I don't know when, but we will.
Good. Yeah. Fantastic.
You tell me when's a good time for us to come visit, and we'll
just let you got Angie's contacts, right? And Penny's. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Just let us know when it would work for you guys, and we can look at our schedules and see how we can work it out, and we'll work it out. I wouldn't miss a chance to meet your husband and meet your kids, and my kids would love to show your kids around and show them all the chickens and the animals and the go-kart and the bicycles. And
they would love that.
The kayak and the canoe and the pond and everything else that makes the rainbow so special.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. Fun forever. Yes, I'm not sure when it will be. Probably in the summer or the fall, if that works for you.
We'll make it work.
Okay, we'll make it work.
Well, before I say goodbye, I want to say thank you to all of you for joining us today. I'm sure that you can see the relevance of this information if you stuck with us this long. I want to say thank you to my sponsors for your love, support, and the amazing products you create in supporting the organic, biodynamic, and free-range farmers of the world. Anything you buy from the podcast, supports the beautiful sponsors, supports the farmers, and supports you, and that's love, baby. And I look forward to sharing something as amazing as I can possibly make happen for the next podcast that'll be out in a week. And I will also look forward to having the amazing Julie Dean Richards back whenever she gets a hold of me and says, Paul, I got something I want to share on your podcast. And I'll say, let's get it on and rock and roll, baby. All right. Lots of love, everybody. Thank you, Julie. Safe travels.
Thank you, Paul. It's the best to see you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Spirit Gym with Paul Chek and today's guest, Julie Dean Richards. You can visit Julie online at crunchylegallady.com, where she helps make the law simple for holistic families. For her astrological readings and other services, go to astrologicalattorney.com and make sure you mention that you heard her on Spirit Gym with Paul Chek. Paul invites you to join his Spirit Gym program and community, where you can share ideas and ask questions about topics discussed in this podcast. There are 3 different levels of membership to fit your budget and lifestyle. You can participate in live Q&A sessions with podcast guests, access the members forum within the Spirit Gym community, where you can chat with other members, Attend weekly virtual meetups with Paul and study his comprehensive Master Key online program. Explore the options and subscribe today by going to myspiritgym.com. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and a warm review on the podcast platform of your choice. This podcast is available on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, and YouTube.